The data validation feature is data that has to be met within a certain condition or criteria that you set. So for example, for these 3 employees, Simpson, Humphreys, and Heffernan, when they want to expense their entertainment, it has to be $100 or less. Now right now there's nothing to prevent them from entering in over $100, except when I use the data validation rule, I can control that. So select the range that you want to control, the data input, and then come up here and click on the Data tab, go to the Data Tools group, and there you go, click on the drop down arrow, and we want to go to Data Validation. Click on that, and by default, every cell allows any value. We're going to change that for this range that we have selected. Click on the drop down arrow and go down to decimal, and the data has to be less than or equal to $100. And then click OK. So when somebody tries to type in something over $100, like Mr. Simpson, 101, hit enter, they get the raspberries. This value does not match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. Well, what the fudge is that? What's the restriction? Is it $2, $5, $10? Well, you can help them out a little bit. So they'll have to click cancel, in which case it clears it out. So there's the control, and they won't be able to enter in anything over $100. So what we can do is reselect our range again, so we can add like an input message or a warning or both by coming back up here on the Data tab to the Data Tools group, clicking on the drop down arrow to Data Validation, and there's the input message and error alert. Now the input message only shows up when the cell is selected. So we can go ahead and say something like for the title, enter an expense, but must be $100 or less. And if we want something more, because they don't get the input message and they want to type in over $100, then we can do the error alert. By default, it's going to stop them. And that's what we saw when they tried to enter in over $100. And you don't have to do the input message. You can actually just have the error alert, but instead of giving you something that we don't understand, we can actually type in why it stopped them. Like the title is going to be reimbursement. We won't reimburse anything over $100. Now you do get 2 other options. If you don't want to prevent them from entering in over $100, you can also do a warning or informational. So for the warning, it's just like that. It means when you select it, you get this yield sign that says warning, we won't pay anything over $100, or maybe we will, and we want them to say, okay, this is for your information, we may not, in which case I could type in we may not. Both of them allow them to enter in anything over 100 except for the stop. That blocks them, but it gives them a message as to why they can't enter in anything over $100, as you just saw, except without the explanation. So let's leave it with the explanation for stop and click OK. And so when he types in, well, when you select the cell, you can see the input message, enter in expense, but must be $100 or less. Great, click off, it disappears, select the cell again, so now you know. But if you try to bypass it and type in 101, there you go, reimbursement. We won't reimburse anything over $100. Do you want to try again? Well, when you click on retry, it highlights the cell, the contents they're in which case you can try to get by it again, but you still get the same error. In which case, we'll click cancel, and let's go ahead and select the range. Come back up here, data validation, and change it from stop to warning to show you what it looks like when it allows you to actually enter in something, but with the warning, that is. Click okie dokie, type in 101, hit enter. We won't reimburse. Do you want to continue? There you go. So if you say yes, it accepts it, but hey, we gave them a warning in both places. 1, when they selected the cell for the input message, the pop-up, and 2, when they try to type in something over $100 with that warning. And let's say they did 90, and then 95. Now, if there's a policy change after data has been entered into a cell, and you want to update the validation rules for that range, what's going to happen, like let's say for example for this range we want to update it so it's got to be $90 or less, and we just did it that night after everybody inputted their numbers. Well, let's see what happens and how Excel handles that by coming back up here, Data Tools group, click on Data Validation, the drop down arrow to Data Validation. And of course we'll have to update all this to say instead of 100, now it's 90, input message will also be 90, and then the settings, now we have to say it's got to be 90 or less. Click OK, and you can see it updates the input message to $90, but it doesn't do anything to those cells that is over $90. But if you want to be able to do a quick check, because you can imagine if you had a huge database and you're like, okay, which ones are over 100? I mean, you could probably spot them, but isn't it easier to have them circled in red because, hey, that's graphical for me. I want to see that. So to do that, you want to circle all those cells that are in violation of the data validation rule. Then come up here to the Data Tools group again, click on the drop-down arrow and say you want to circle invalid data. There you go. So now they're out of line, but if they come back in and they change it to $90 or less, then the red circle disappears. And then if you don't want to even deal with it, say, look, I don't want to see the red circles, you don't have to enter in a new number if you want to keep the number, because that's what he really expects, and so we'll go, okay, this one time. Then come back up here, click on the drop-down arrow, and do clear validation circles, and it's gone. Now, a few other things that I want to show you is like you can control the amount of text that can be entered into a cell, like the destination, because when it comes to sales, and they're going throughout the country, it's just within the United States. And we can use the post office abbreviation for the states, just 2 letters, like for Utah, UT, Arizona, AZ. And then let's come back up here with the cell selected for the destination and do data validation again. Change it from any value to text length, and the text length has to be less than or equal to 2 characters. And then, like I said, you can have an input message, an error alert, or both. How about if we just skip the input message and do an error alert and stop them from entering in anything more than 2 characters? So it doesn't accept anything more than that. Otherwise, if we want to, we could say, well, give it a warning or information. So let's do stop and say something like, for the states, please enter in only 2 letters. Click OK. So when somebody comes up here and says, hey, I've been to Utah, U-T-A-H, hit enter. Only 2 letters. Oh, rats. Retry. UT, enter, it accepts it. And then finally, if you want to be able to have a list to choose from to really control what they input into a cell, then come back up here, and we're talking about departments here. So we've got the sales, training, consulting, things like that. Come back up here, click on the data validation drop-down arrow to data validation. Let's go to the settings tab. It's not any value. We want it from a list. Now the list can come from one of 2 ways. Either click in the source field and then start typing in your list, like sales, and then use the comma as your delimiter or separator from the other data, like sales, training, comma, consulting. And then when you're done, just go ahead and click Okie dokie, and then you get the drop-down arrow. When you click off, you don't see it, but when you click on the cell, you're like, oh, what's that? That's cute. Click on the drop-down arrow. Oh, they're controlling my input. Well, from one of these 3 departments, I guess I can't expense anything. But you can go ahead and select it, and there you go. Now, you can do it that way, or with it selected, come back up here, click on the drop-down arrow, and go to data validation. And you can actually select the source if you already have it typed within your spreadsheet, or within your workbook for that matter, on another worksheet. And there's my range there. So we can go ahead and clear that out. Click on the collapsible dialog box button, or with the cursor flashing in it, just go ahead and click and drag, and it collapses and expands it open, which, by the way, this range, the named range, is Department DEPT, which is really nice because you can imagine if you had a huge range that went for 100 cells, clicking and dragging can get ridiculous because if you overshoot it, then you got to come back. So it's nice if you can just go ahead and type in equals DEPT, because that will work as well. And then click Okie dokie, and then come up here, click on the drop-down arrow, and hey, it's pulling everything from this range. So if you want to update the range and include anything that you've added or have taken away from it, then you'll go ahead and select the cell and make sure that you select any extra cells or additional cells for that data validation that you want to include in that drop-down list here. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for all my training, please visit me at my website, dreamforce.us.